we're going to jump into the next share screen of topics. I have to reset this. Library of Congress. This is going to be from the Albuquerque Morning Journal from October 12th of 1909. And the other one is also Library of Congress. The Lafayette Falcon from Tennessee, January 9th, 1920. Those are the two I will be reading from. Whilst we play a lovely visual on the topic of hurricanes.
The Slurricanes in Florida.
Swirling vortex of rearranging that property, that tree, that house.
Oh,
The
here we
whole
go.
shebang. Full screen ready?
Yep.
All right. Howling gale sweeps over summer seas. Key West seas front mass of shapeless wreckage. Key West, Florida, October 11th. While the hurricane is not the worst Key West has ever experienced, the local observer, the local weather observer said tonight, 100 vessels were in the harbor. Of these, only 5 remained at anchor, the others having either gone to sea or were smashed upon the beaches. The streets along the waterfront, this is like very faded ink. The streets along the waterfront are a mass of wreckage. Brick as well as frame buildings. I guess that means wooden frame. Yeah, okay. Brick as well as frame buildings throughout the city suffered from the hurricane, and many miraculous escapes from death have been reported. Several factories were, oh, that is so fainted, partly destroyed, including, there's a list. I'm not going to read the list. But this is interesting. The storm reached its height at 1 o'clock when the winds had an estimated velocity of 100 miles an hour. This was a hard, steady blow from 8 to 3 o'clock p.m. when the winds began to die, and at 3 o'clock the center of the hurricane had passed. But it said it had passed here. Railway laborers cut off from the mainland. Well, from Miami, Florida, October 11th, all efforts of officials of the Florida East Coast Railroad here to get into communications with the men at work. On 3,000 workmen are employed at the construction work on the lower keys. Grave fears are held for the safety of these men. In the hurricane of 1906, 140 men lost their lives. So this is 3 years before. This article's from 1909. It is said that the construction camps are better fortified now, to this date of this article.
Oh, now they are. Now they're better fortified.
Well, 3 years later, you always make improvements. There's always a stronger storm to come and just kick your rear end in. Government life-saving stations in danger zone. The life-saving service lost many of its boats during the last hurricane off of the Gulf Coast. The nearest establishment to the Sand Key section is the Biscayne Bay, I don't say that right, It's Cane. I'm saying it wrong. House of Refuge, more than 100 miles north of the Keys. Wow, that's pretty far. So there was some tidbits of information. A little bit, especially when, it's 1909. Travel is a little difficult back then. All right, the next article. Hurricane, champion of destruction. This is
Champions
also
of destruction.
1920. To fight the hurricane offensively is folly. For ages, mankind has been able to wage only a defensive war against its terrifying drives, and these efforts have been, until modern times, pitifully feeble. Pitifully.
Pitifully.
Man's only defense is to be forewarned. That is, that it has been possible in the present generation to reduce death tolls of hurricane to a minimum is due to the marvelous service maintained by the United States Weather Bureau. The Bureau. The headquarters of the Weather Bureau, located in the nation's capital, of course, are the nerve center of the unique organization which extends across the continent and also far out to sea. Since many vessels cooperate with the Bureau, that's why you better cooperate, by making daily reports. This is 1920. I had to do more research into the Weather Bureau.
The Weather Bureau.
The Weather Bureau.
The Bureau.
Yeah. Okay. Great storm sighted. Early in September, a hurricane destined to devastate a wide area bordering the Gulf of Mexico reared its head like a great monster 1,000 miles to the southeast of the United States, along the islands of the Caribbean. Right? You could see that. You could see it coming. There's really nothing better than I could see it coming. Standing. That's another reason for observation towers, right? With like water towers and observation towers. As to what gave it birth, not even the scientists know. That was the next sentence. As to what gave it birth, scientists don't even know. The forces that propagated all of these storms are shrouded in mystery. Well, according to today, it comes off of the Sahara. Is that what they say?
Yeah, they come off of Africa, the tropical waves.
This particular hurricane was born in remote tropical waters, probably about September 5th. A few hundred miles north of the center was disturbance. A few hundred miles north of the center of disturbance, the sea was relatively calm. Passengers on a steamer passing this way had no intimidation of the terrific force that was generating off to the south. It's like, I can't. It just seems like the grammar is so different. I'm like, okay, I'll just pick at it. Early reports of this hurricane were mingered. That's not even manager. That's mingered. Early reports of the hurricane were mingered indeed. Mingered. The first intimidation of the coming of disaster was received September 8th, 3 days later. Wow. The daily forecast for that date stated that a tropical storm had appeared to the southeast of Key West. But as to its extent, or its course, the chief forecaster at the time could only conjecture. Despite his long experience in his profession, it was inevitable that the forecaster should be anxious. Every meteorologist who is forecasting at such a time is anxious. He had been on duty in Simpsons past. Oh my gosh, is that how they spelled seasons back then? That's like really squished, it's smudged. Seasons past, not a single hurricane appeared. But in other years between July and October, more than one such storm had left a devastation across many states. The forecaster knew that millions of dollars, not millions of lives, but millions of dollars worth of cargoes about to sail from the Atlantic and Gulf ports might be lost if he failed. Wow. I know there's a lot at stake when you consider certain things, but wow. Oh my goodness. All right, that's a good enough reading for now. We're going to go to a special message from our unofficial sponsor.
Yes, which will include Hurricane Andrew, which is historically recorded as one of the worst devastating hurricanes ever to hit. So
don't spoil it.
Let's see what they have here.
Yep, don't spoil it.
It is really hard to imagine that it was 30 years ago when this terrible storm hit us here in South Dade.
Public officials gathering in Homestead today, marking a major milestone, 30 years since the landfall of Hurricane Andrew, which remains one of the single most destructive storms in Florida's history.
It destroyed 63,000 homes. It left 175,000 people homeless.
The Category 5 hurricane making landfall in August of 1992, devastating several parts of southwest Miami-Dade, including Homestead and Cutler Ridge, now called Cutler Bay. While speaking at the Homestead Air Reserve Base, officials who were in Miami-Dade at the time recounted where they were and how the state's storm readiness has dramatically improved in the years since.
Andrew was an important mark in building code reform. Officials learned so much in surveying the damage, about compromising garage doors, roof structures, basically how to hold homes together.
Tomorrow, I do have the track of Hurricane Andrew. Obviously started as a tropical system, quickly gained strength and had a large impact from a storm surge in the Bahamas of 23 feet to rainfall of almost a foot across parts of Louisiana and, of course, the devastating landfall across southeast Florida as a Category 5 hurricane. The max sustained winds with Andrew, 170 miles an hour.
Strong enough to thrust 2x4s through trees. The storm also exposed serious flaws in the way we built our homes. The destruction from Andrew eventually led to a total transformation in Florida's building code.
30 years ago, this video of Hurricane Andrew stunned the world. The compact Category 5 storm changed the coastline of Florida, building codes, and the way we forecast hurricanes.
Forecasting hurricanes was a lot more challenging back in 1992.
We really didn't think you could forecast where a hurricane was going to go more than about a day or two in advance. So the average error, for example, 3 days out, was from Miami to Jacksonville.
That's about 300 miles. Now fast forward 30 years to the present day. The average track error 3 days out is about 100 miles. That's the same distance from Tampa to... The advancement in technology is a big reason why forecasts have improved so much. For example, Hurricane Hunter aircrafts like this now use sensors called microwave radiometers that can incredibly estimate a storm's strength based on how much foam is created on top of the sea. Another big improvement since Hurricane Andrew, weather satellites. And the newest generation of weather satellites allow us to track storms in high definition with much more detail and data. All this data gets fed into our forecast models, which gives us a much clearer picture where a storm will go and how strong it could get. Andrew ended up being the strongest type of storm on Earth, a Category 5 hurricane. And as we look back on the 30-year anniversary, one of the biggest lessons learned is making sure we're always prepared for the worst. Because as Andrew taught us, sometimes the worst can happen.